All right, continuing on with our 6.3 notes, we see that we have another fraction exponent. So what am I going to do in order to get rid of that fraction exponent? The reciprocal, and what's my reciprocal? 3 over 2. And whatever we do to one side, we do to the other side. So 3 over 2 and 2 over 3, those cancel out. We are left with 3x plus 4 equals, and what am I going to do with 16? How do I rewrite that? Very good. The square root of 16 to the third power. What is the square root of 16?
4.
And so now we have 4 cubed, which is 64. That is correct. Now this is where it's kind of tricky a little bit. But this one is plus or minus. And that's because that bottom number is an even number of 2. If that bottom number was a 3, then we wouldn't have to worry about it, which on example 4, it was a 3, right? Odds, you have 1 answer. Evens, you have 2 answers. So since this bottom number was a 2, that's dealing with square roots. Whenever it's an even root, 2 answers. Okay? So we're going to write 2 equations now. We have 3x plus 4 equals 64, and 3x plus 4 equals negative 64. And then you are going to solve them. So I subtract 4. 3x equals 60. Divide by 3. X equals 20. Over here I subtract 4. 3x equals negative 68. We divide by 3. Can 3 go into 68? Nope. So that means we'll just leave our answer like that. So our answers are x equals 20 and negative 68 over 3. Okay, questions before we move on? Okay, I'm going to have you guys think about example 6 for about 10 seconds here. Think about what you think the next step should be. And I'm going to pull a popsicle stick. You might not get it right, which is fine, but I would like to know what you think the next step should be. Daisy, what do you think?
I guess 2.
Exactly. Good. You have 2 square roots. There's no way of like putting those square roots together. So they're already by themselves. So if we square both sides, which is what Daisy said we should do, we're going to get rid of both of our square roots. Okay? So we are still doing the same thing to both sides. I get rid of the square root here, which leaves me with 2x plus 5. And I get rid of the square over here, which is x plus 7. And we can solve it. So we solve it now by finishing this problem, where I'm going to subtract x. And I get x plus 5 equals 7. We subtract 5. And x equals 2. Okay, so to recap, we had 2 square roots. There's nothing I can do to move those around. But if I square both sides, I was able to get rid of both of the square roots and just solve for x. So even though it looked complicated at the beginning, it actually ended up being pretty easy. Yeah? No, okay, because here's the thing that's kind of weird. This one, the roots were already there. On the previous one, we ended up making the root because of the exponents, which is what gave me the plus or minus. Okay. Example 7. Again, I'm going to have you guys think here. What do you think our first step is going to be on number 7? Mandel, what do you think our first step is? What? Yes, very good. Square both sides. The root's by itself, there's nothing else I can do, so I have to square both sides. Okay, when I square a square root, it just becomes what's inside, which is x plus 10. But, don't tell me the answer, because I'm going to pull a stick. What am I going to do for x minus 2 squared? And I pulled Lita. What am I going to do? Exactly. You're going to do your box or foil method. So you have x minus 2, and we have 2 of them. So if I make a box, we have x minus 2 and x minus 2. We get x squared, negative 2x, negative 2x, and a positive 4. So when I combine my like terms, I end up with x squared minus 4x plus 4. Okay, so the next question is, what is my next step? What am I going to have to do on this problem? I feel like I'm picking the same people as I picked yesterday. I'm sorry. Kate. Yes, combine your like terms, and you want it set equal to 0. So I'm going to subtract x and subtract 10 to make it set equal to 0. We have x squared minus 5x minus 6 equals 0. And what will I do now? Jesse, what will I do now? Starts with an F. Yes, we're going to factor. So when we factor, we're trying to find what multiplies to be negative 6 and adds to be negative 5. So what numbers are going to work? 2 and 3, you'd have to have them both negatives, and then when you multiply negative 2 and negative 3, it'd make a positive 6. So that won't work. Negative 6 and a positive 1. So those multiply to be negative 6, and those will add to be negative 5. And then when you set those equal to 0, you get x equals 6 and negative 1. Okay, here's the deal. When you get 2 answers, you need to check to make sure they both work. Okay? So if we check this, if I plug 6 in here, what is 6 minus 2? 4. In fact, we can even write this. 6 minus 2 equals the square root of 6 plus 10. Okay, 6 minus 2 is 4, and the square root of 16, is that also 4? Yeah. Okay, so 6 works. Now let's check negative 1. So we have negative 1 minus 2 equals the square root of negative 1 plus 10. Negative 1 minus 2 is what? And then we get the square root of 9. And the square root of 9 is 3. Are those the same? Negative 3 and 3, they're the same? No, negative 3 and 3 are not the same. So negative 1 doesn't work, so my only answer is 6. So when you have 2 answers, check them. Okay? And you can actually check all of them all the time. But usually when you have 2 answers, one of them is going to end up not working when you plug it back in. Okay, number 8. If you get to a question like number 8 on your homework, you do not have to do it. Number 8 will be an extra credit question on your test. Do you guys want to see how to do it? Yes. Okay. Do you see on this problem, there's no way of getting all your roots on one side. There's no way of getting rid of this positive 2. So the only way to do this problem right now is to square both sides. Okay? So we're going to square both sides. And when I do that, over here these cancel. And I get 10 minus 3x, which is nice. But what do you think I'm going to have to do on the left side because it has like a plus 2? You're going to have to end up doing your box or foil. Okay? Which is going to look a little bit weird. Okay? Are you guys ready? So I'm going to make a box. We have it's 2 by 2. And these are our terms. One term is the square root of x plus 6, and one term is 2. So you have root x plus 6 and a 2, and root x plus 6 and a 2. When I multiply root x plus 6 times root x plus 6, what do you think that becomes? Which actually, if you have root x plus 6 squared, it's just going to end up being x plus 6. Okay? So these two are the same roots. When I multiply those together, I just get x plus 6. When you go 2 times root x plus 6, what are you going to get? 2 root x plus 6. On the bottom, when I go 2 times root x plus 6, I get 2 root x plus 6. And then 2 times 2 is 4. Okay, so when I write this out, I have an x, okay, and then 6 and 4 is 10, so x plus 10. And then 2 root x plus 6 and 2 root x plus 6 will make 4 root x plus 6. Okay. Who thinks they know what our next step here is going to be? What you're going to want to do now is try to get that root by itself again. So we're going to subtract the x and subtract the 10 to start with. So I subtract x and I subtract 10. And so right now I have 4 root x plus 6 equals, here these cancel out, and negative 3x and negative x makes negative 4x. Okay, now what do you think? Okay, divide by 4. So now I have root x plus 6 equals negative x. Good. Now what? Square both sides. Again, exactly. We square both sides, which then gets rid of the root, and I have x plus 6 equals, and what is negative x squared? X squared, right? Now what? You want it set equal to 0, and you're going to have to factor. But you want x squared to be positive, so we're going to subtract x and subtract 6. So I get x squared minus x minus 6 equals 0. When we factor that, what numbers do I get? X minus 3 and an x plus 2. Those multiply to be negative 6 and add to be negative 1. And so what does x equal? Good, x equals 3 and negative 2. Whenever you get 2 answers, though, you need to check them. Okay? So if I go back to my original problem, let's start with 3. You have the square root of 3 plus 6, and then you have plus 2 equals the square root of 10 minus 3 times 3. What's 3 plus 6? 9. Okay? What is the square root of 9? 3. And then we have 3 plus 2, which makes 5. Over here, what's 3 times 3? 9. What's 10 minus 1? 10 minus 9? And what's the square root of 1? 1. So did 3 work? No. 3 is out. So I'm assuming that negative 2 probably works, but you should double check it. So we have the square root of negative 2 plus 6. Yes, sorry about that. The square root of negative 2 plus 6, and then plus 2 equals the square root of 10 minus 3 times negative 2. What's negative 2 plus 6? 4. What's the square root of 4? 2, and 2 plus 2 is 4. Over here, what is negative 3 times negative 2? Positive 6, and 10 plus 6 is, and the square root of 16 is, so this one works. So negative 2, x equals negative 2 is my answer. And as you can see, that was a lot of work. I'm going to go ahead and end this recording now.